Welcome to Making Sense of the Madness. We got a great show lined up for you today. First, we have Dr. Stanley K. Ridgely. We're going to be talking about DEI exposed, how the biggest con of the century almost toppled higher education. Then we've got longtime Donald Trump friend and lawyer Peter Ticktin. What makes Trump tick? We're going to be talking about January 6th, the United Nations, some of the executive orders, and beyond. You're not going to want to miss it. Buckle up and get ready to make sense of the madness. And we are back. The book is DEI Exposed, How the Biggest Con of the Century Almost Toppled Higher Education. Joining us now is Dr. Stanley K. Ridgely. Thank you so much for being with us. Now, before we get into the book, the topic of diversity, equity, and inclusivity, let us know a little bit about yourself, your background, and why you chose this as a subject for your latest book.
Well, thanks so much for bringing me on the show, Jason. It's a real honor and pleasure, and I know you have an erudite audience and is interested in these issues that are plaguing our nation right now. I am a clinical professor of strategic management at Drexel University's LeBeau College of Business. I'm a former military intelligence officer. I have a PhD and master's in international relations from Duke University, an international MBA. I've taught around the world and in Russia and China and Colombia and France and Singapore. And this levens my perspective, certainly in the diversity realm. I chose this book as the successor book to my previous volume, which is is Brutal Minds. And Brutal Minds tells a story of how our students are being indoctrinated on college campuses. It's a very brutal book. It cites and names names. And let me adjust this real quick so we don't have a lot of extra noise here.
Mm-hmm.
It names names, it names schools, it names techniques, and DEI Exposed follows that volume. And it names names, names techniques, and it's basically a big con. And I discovered that it's a big con, i.e. a fraud story that's designed to swindle universities out of lots of money. Discovered it in my own experiences, and I said, how far does this thing go? How is it possible that very smart people on the college campuses could have been swindled, could have been convinced that America is this inherently racist country? Because that's the con story. Inherently racist country. It's riven with white supremacy culture, and that all whites are racist, all people of color, as it's convenient, are victims of this racism. And if you pay us, meaning DEI folks, if you pay us, universities, we will come onto your campus, establish a bureaucracy, and we will give you absolution for your guilt in this white supremacy culture. It's a beautiful business model. It's basically a grift. It's a big con. It's very much like the movie from 1974, The Sting, with Paul Newman and Robert Redford, in which they manufacture a big con to swindle a character out of lots and lots of money. And that's what's going on right now on the college campus. And I thought it important to reveal that, because it wasn't being done in any circles other than, say, Christopher Rufo and James Lindsay and those types of august authors.
So before we even get into the collegiate and mass academic aspect of DEI, let's take it back to just general education. Because when I was a kid, I'm 45 years young. I'm a college dropout, by the way. I'm a glorified pizza guy. It shocks me how smart some of these people actually think they are and how ignorant they are on certain subjects. But when I was a kid, we didn't even have Martin Luther King Jr. Day, let alone Black History Month or any of those things. But when that was coming on the scene, really what was being taught in school was this idea that you were to base your opinion on somebody or something based on their character, not the color of their skin, not something that will later become identity politics. Again, by their actions and not by something that is superficial. Made sense to me. And then I fast forward now to where my nieces, who I help take care of, they're in school, and I've constantly got to look over my shoulder. And by the way, they're black. I don't want them playing the victims. I don't want them thinking that they're not going to have any other opportunity because they're black. I don't want them to be ignorant to the idea that there isn't some racism or bigotry out there. But I certainly don't want it institutionalized where they don't think they can get a leg up based on what they look like. I've seen that movement, again, not just in colleges, but in grade school, middle school, high school now, over the last 10, 15, maybe even 20 years. Where do you see this origin story of this movement?
Well, I think that you have certainly laid out my own experience and the idea that you're supposed to focus on a person's actual actions, words, their character, and how they behave to, if you're going to assess them and make any kind of judgment whatsoever. But nowadays, you're supposed to look and see first a person's race and then judge them by virtue of that race. And I think that it's a terrible binary primitive ideology, the idea of good and bad, oppressors and oppressed, exploiters and exploited, light and dark. It's a very primitive Manichaean doctrine that is really thousands of years old. And the idea that we have moved race, I use we advisedly, we have moved race to the forefront. And that's the first thing we're supposed to notice. And we're supposed to base judgments on these superficial characteristics and to set aside any notion of our own personal experience of, well, I know this person. I've known this person for a number of years. And you're telling me that I should believe in this alternate reality that you have constructed and that you were on the college campus propounding that, no, this person is an oppressor. And I'm supposed to treat this person as some sort of villain. Moreover, wait a minute, I don't feel like I'm a victim. But because of my skin color, I'm supposed to feel victimized. And moreover, I can identify who's doing the victimization right over there. And so you can see when we talk about divisive concepts on the college campus, what I just defined for you, what I just laid out for you is exactly what is being taught on the college campuses under the banner of social justice and DEI. Now, I'm willing to bargain that, wager, I should say, that most people did not conceive of this DEI as what I just described to you. Most often people, it's like an empty decanter and we can fill it with whatever we like. People of goodwill, people, mostly liberals and folks of other persuasions, they fill it with their good feelings, their own good feelings. The definition is left to the individual. Oh, diversity, equity, and inclusion. Oh, that sounds so wonderful. It's wonderful. It sounds almost enlightened, like the Enlightenment University. It must be a good thing. And they focus on that rather than looking, it's like creating a level playing field. It's giving everyone a fair shot. Oh, it's just teaching about race. It's just teaching about slavery, when it's actually none of those things as applied on the university campus. None of those things. If those things happen, it's simply a byproduct or an unintended consequence. The primary activity is training students, faculty, and staff to dislike each other, to identify each other as simple categories of race or gender, or even class a little bit, and then treat them accordingly. It is this false or alternative reality that these folks, DEI folks, are trying to get people to believe in. It's an entirely different alien worldview. And rather than say, put on your thinking cap, engage your critical faculties, and engage with people and find out what they're all about based on their personal experiences and the multiplicity of impacts that their personal history has had on them. And so that's the reality of DEI. It's a lot worse than what I just described. The people who believe in this are actually training young people into behaving as if they had a mental illness, training them as if they're paranoiacs. We want you to be hyper suspicious of the people around you based on these superficial characteristics. Cock an eye at these folks. Are they looking at you funny? Are they not opening the door for you whenever you should be having the door open for you? Is there some sort of problem going on here? That's called microaggressions, by the way. And it substitutes for actual racist events or actions by people on the college campus. Jason, let me point out something to you. If you want to test this for yourself, ask anyone who believes in this facade, this grift of DEI, pick a university and say, hey, who are the racist people, policies, procedures, programs that are in effect on your college campus? And can you name a single or even say half a dozen of these overt racist events or actions that have occurred on your campus in, say, the last 10 years? And more often than not, they will not be able to cite a single instance, and they will not cite specific programs, policies, procedures, or even people who are guilty of this malady that they are supposed to, they being the DEI folks, are supposed to expunge from the university. It's really absurd how many people have bought into this big con.
So let's highlight a few of the things that you talked about. Let's use some terminology that they love to use. Their version of events to me is rather, quote unquote, problematic, especially when we're talking about inherent racism, right? You kind of mentioned the idea that because of your skin color, you are an oppressor in this world where everybody who is, quote unquote, Caucasian or white is responsible for slavery. Let's take a look at my life for a moment. On one side, we're Italian. We came in just before World War II. Served in World War II. Other side, European mutts. Didn't come here till after World War II. Let me explicitly say, nobody in my direct bloodline ever had anything to do with slavery whatsoever, the Civil War. We weren't here. That's one. Now, two, I'm a little darker because of my Italian heritage. I'm not going to lie. I think that racism actually has gotten much better. It kind of made this comeback in the media under the Donnie T presidency. But in reality, I lived in a generation by the late 90s where, I was at Woodstock 99. You saw the hip hop culture and the rock culture cross over. You really did feel like racism was pretty much over in this country. Nobody was looking at the other person sideways because of the color of their skin or their accent. And yet, we're not even allowed to look at that as kind of a golden era. Now they've made that about toxic masculinity. And they've made it about the patriarchy and all this other Johnny nonsense. Now, you mentioned classism also. They like to dabble in that, okay? They don't really love to put it on the table. And let me explain to people why. I grew up dirt poor. I often joke around that I am much blacker than many of my black friends. I sat in the welfare and the WIC lines. Back in the day before it was a little magic card where you swipey and everybody didn't know, where you had that book of food stamps. By 5-6 years old, I started to understand what was going on when I was like literally the only white kid in that line. All right. So I'm not saying that there isn't economic or social challenges, but you create a system where you put people on the dole, and I experienced that in my own life. You create generational victims. It's the shame of my family. It makes me disgusted and sick. So many people still in my family expect something for nothing. They play the victim constantly. So this really does go beyond race, but now it's been enabled. I asked you this question before, but, I went to a state school in New York. I went to Oneonta. And even then, there were certain programs where they were starting to build around race. Now, sure, that was also coming with socioeconomic status, but it wasn't really a meritocracy when it came to the bank accounts of the student. There were other factors involved, and those are the superficial ones. And we're talking about late 90s, early 2000s. Now, some people I saw flourish in these programs. They worked in the student affairs office. They worked in there and they got jobs afterwards, etc. It seemed to help them. Other people, maybe not so much. But I feel like, again, anybody that was on that economic level should have been able to do that, and nobody should have been excluded. And these were the stepping stones to where we are today, where so many more are excluded. Love to get your thoughts on that.
Well, you bring up, and at the very beginning of your peroration, you talked about classism and the idea of class warfare. That's straight out of Marx. The idea that we derive our ideas from our station in life, i.e., our class in life. And we're talking about the proletariat, the bourgeoisie, the aristocracy, and that sort of thing. The woke crowd, the DEI crowd, have kind of pushed that aside, as you well note, because the idea of class disadvantage can be remedied, and it can be remedied by programs that do not racially discriminate, and basically are programs that are designed to equalize our society and to address the so-called wealth gap, which is simply a contrived. You compare two groups of people, and you've got, according to how you group the people, you've got this big gap. Never mind the fact that the people in the categories are constantly changing. Some people are getting richer, better off. Some people are getting poorer off. And the idea, well, if we're going to address that, why don't we address it economically? Why don't we address it with financial programs that are designed to lift people up, irrespective of race, class? I'm sorry. Well, yeah, race and class and gender. Well, that's not exactly what the DEI folks have in mind, because that kind of butts against the notion that some people are racially disadvantaged because of their race. And this constitutes systemic racism. All well and good. My book is about the remedies that are being brought onto the college campuses that are designed supposedly to address the problems that have been identified. And I should say that again and again, people who want to engage with me, who are DEI aficionados, they never address the remedies. They give a recitation of the problems that afflict our society, the racial disparities, and so on and so on, and the necessity to teach people about race and teach people about slavery, which has been going on for quite some time anyway. But they absolutely refuse to address the actual programs on the college campus, which are toxic, ideologically motivated, basically do exactly what I said they do in the very first part of the show, of identifying people according to these superficial characteristics, making judgments about those people, and then inflicting fake programs on them that are based in the fake program of white privilege. I should say, Jason, because you were in that line you mentioned a moment ago, the DEI advocates would say, well, you just didn't take advantage of the white privilege that was available to you. That's what they say. Seriously, that is what they say. You didn't take advantage of this privilege, your station in life. So the problem was yours. These other folks were in line with you. Well, they have this unlucky card that they were dealt. So you see, their theory and explanations morph according to the occasion and according to the skin color that you happen to be. And so the idea, we have to gin up or manufacture racism so that we can justify our jobs on the college campus. We're going to gin up what we call racial microaggressions, which are basically whatever I think, if I'm a person of color, whatever I think that the attack is, or the affront or the insult is, and whether it's intended or not, or even happened or not, doesn't matter. What matters is how I feel. And these are being categorized on the campuses today in racial instances to manufacture and pump up the level of so-called racism on the campuses. And so, we had 221 instances of racism on the campus, and you find out that maybe more than half of those were simply imagined instances that people reported. Oh, he looked at me funny. And if you think I'm making this up about the door, he didn't open the door for me. I actually heard this said to me by a chief diversity officer, that this was an ongoing problem at my university. People not opening doors for other people, and people taking that as an insult. And so you really opened a can of worms there when you talk about class, because sometimes it's favorable for the DEI folks, and at other times they want to focus on something else.
The book is DEI Exposed, How the Biggest Con of the Century Almost Toppled Higher Education. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be back with more Making Sense of the Madness after this. Hey everybody, Jason Bermas here. Let you know that Making Sense of the Madness is changing for a bit. Soon enough, we're going to be moving to a more commentary-driven show, which airs live on my socials. Now, we hope to get some minor sponsors at $1,000 a piece each month and move it back in the direction of what you just saw with those great interviews with people who have done deep research. Now, until then, I really do need your support individually as well. Consider donating via the links down below, especially the Buy Me a Coffee, $5, $10, $15. It does mean the world to me, and it keeps this broadcast moving. Thank you so much, Bermas Brigade, for your continued support. And we are back. Now, one of the other things that I started to notice even early on when I was a teenager in college. I remember being a freshman, and I was in this philosophy class, and the teacher started, framing this idea, an absurd one, that the entire class was stranded on this island, and we were going to have to figure out how to survive, okay? And as you can imagine, very quickly, it moved into this quote-unquote collectivist mindset. I won't call it communist or socialist, but we have to share everything.
Right.
And just out of the gates, out of human nature of being like an 18-year-old kid and looking around at the numbers, I was like, no, thanks. I really don't want to share the 4 women that are here with the 18 dudes that are in the in the class. I go, on that level alone, we're not sharing. I go, if we want to be helpful to one another, that's great. If we want to barter with one another, that's great. I'm going to have my own private property, thank you. And I was the pariah, and nobody could understand my mindset. And they kept trying to convince me otherwise, and I'm like, nope, I'm good. Didn't do so well in that class. Not going to lie. But even then, that's where I felt this push that things were changing from this. I was an AP kid, right? I saw the value of the Constitution and the Bill of Rights and the rugged individual and dissenting opinions and why we weren't a straight democracy and how if we wanted to change the Constitution, you had to have a 2/3 vote in one house, a 3/4 vote in another. In other words, there were these structures that were supposed to be checks and balances in place for the little guy. Now, look. Imperfect document. Blacks are not 3/5 of people. Women should be able to vote. Fixed it. We fixed it. They knew we'd have to fix it. We fixed it. People refuse to acknowledge that and have moved so far away from that. Go ahead.
Well, you really addressed a lot of the idea of equity, which is the middle letter of the acronym DEI. And people tend to confuse that with equality. When we talk about equality, we're talking about everyone gets a fair shot at the brass ring, a chance to fulfill their dreams, whereas equity means that we're all going to finish up at the finish line simultaneously. And the island example that you gave, where we're going to share everything, really, I address this, and I've never done this, and I certainly don't plan to do it because I get in trouble with regard to how you run a class. You can run a class that's based on social justice, where everyone's going to get their fair share. You can say, well, we're going to have our first test, and rather than everyone earning a grade that they've worked for and receiving a mark that really measures their knowledge, we're going to insist that everyone share fairly the points that are go into a central pot, and everyone's test points go into a central pot, and we then divide up the points by the number of people in the class, so everyone gets the same grade. We're all lifted up theoretically, and everyone finishes at the finish line at the same point. Well, you set up an incentive system, of course, that the people who are working hard are going to do better than the people who are not working as hard, are differently abled perhaps, who have more interest in, say, extracurricular activities than studying for this particular test. And the people who score the highest are going to say, well, you know what? Why am I doing that? I'm not going to work only to get the same grade as someone who's not working hard. So why don't I just sit back? And what you'll find throughout a semester or a quarter, that the overall pot of points is going to get smaller and smaller as everyone leaves it to others to actually do the work. And this is the natural result of equity. And it's equity in practice. And I think your island example of sharing all of the goods there on the island in some sort of communal pot where everyone is equal, everyone according to his ability, everyone according to his need, which goes back to 1875 Marx's dictum. I think it's from I can't recall exactly what of his many, many works that came from, but he's the first expression of equity. And I think that it's important that we understand these practical examples of what it means to have equity and everyone arriving at the finish line at the same time. It's the finish line is not going to be a place that you really care about that much if your work is dismissed and you're simply given a reward that was kind of generally or tepidly distributed as just for being there. It's kind of like a participation trophy. Equity is a participation trophy writ large, I think.
Give me third place over participation every single day of the week. That way I can maybe get second or first and actually feel good about it the next time around. Or maybe I fail and I don't get a trophy or a ribbon at all. That's the way the world actually works, folks. Final question.
Mm-hmm.
We've got a shift, obviously, in the administration, in the policies, but I would also say in the culture in large part. At the same
Mm-hmm.
time, I don't think DEI is going away, certainly not without kicking and screaming. What do you see as the future of DEI within the next several months and years? And if we are able to push away from that via this administration and via those in power right now, what are the chances it makes a comeback, and unfortunately a comeback that's even more powerful?
Well, I think that the winds are blowing in the right direction, or as the leftists like to say, the arc of history is bending in our direction. It's bending in the direction of justice. We have a new Department of Justice, a new Department of Education, an Office of Civil Rights that plans to enforce America's civil rights laws on the college campuses. Or if you don't do that, you're going to put your federal funding at risk. And this is a new sea change, if you will, with respect to how the government deals with illegal discrimination on the college campuses. I think that, of course, DEI is going to fade initially for certainly the next year, and it's going to morph into other things. Whereas it arrived on the campuses with great ballyhoo and announcements and fanfare, you're going to see it slowly morph and retreat. And you're going to find diversity offices changing their names, moving personnel around, trying to submerge the programs and so that they don't violate U.S. civil rights law against racial discrimination and equal protection under the Constitution. Now, my view, if I were inclined to be on their side and say, well, you know what, we need to do something to remedy the sins of the past, et cetera, well, then change federal law, remove the protections of the civil rights law, and say it's okay to discriminate against certain people because of their race. And then those programs will be constitutionally approved. You'll be within the law, but you will certainly have gutted the American Civil Rights Act and Equal Protection Clause.
Sorry about that. You saw me moving my lips. I appreciate that. And you essentially eliminate the idea of a meritocracy based on humanity and their actions. And you can have the worst person in the world in charge or in power solely based on their appearance. That is appearance and politics, let's be honest about it. That's complete and total insanity. You can get the book over at Amazon right now, DEI Exposed, How the Biggest Con of the Century Almost Toppled Higher Education. Thank you so much for joining us, Stanley. We appreciate it. We got to take a break, and we will be back with more Making Sense of the Madness after this. Hey everybody, Jason Bermas here. Let you know that Making Sense of the Madness is changing for a bit. Soon enough, we're going to be moving to a more commentary-driven show, which airs live on my socials. Now, we hope to get some minor sponsors at $1,000 a piece each month and move it back in the direction of what you just saw with those great interviews with people who have done deep research. Now, until then, I really do need your support individually as well. Consider donating via the links down below, especially the Buy Me a Coffee, $5, $10, $15. It does mean the world to me, and it keeps this broadcast moving. Thank you so much, Bermas Brigade, for your continued support. And we are back. We are now joined by Peter Ticktin. He is the author of What Makes Trump Tick and a lifelong friend from his days back in West Point. Thank you so much for joining us. Now, I've had you on the program a couple times, and the last time we kind of ended the conversation talking about the United Nations and the fact that I wanted the U.S. out of the UN and the UN out of the US. Well, now that seems to actually be a possibility. I don't know if we're actually going to get there, but one of those executive orders that I really did appreciate and enjoy was the fact that Trump immediately wanted to remove ourselves from the World Health Organization, which is really one of these operations that obviously orbits the UN and modern day globalism. So, in that regard, and that executive order, where do you think this administration is going to move? And do you think it's a possibility that we might actually be able to get out of the United Nations after all these years?
I'll tell you. All right, the World Health Organization is a very dangerous organization. It has tremendous power in terms of different accords that have been made throughout the world with it. And it attempted during Biden's term to get us to sign over our sovereignty, under certain circumstances. So if there is whatever they deem to be a pandemic, then they should be able to decide whether you wear a mask, whether you get a particular injection for whatever else they're going to be coming up with that similar to the vax. This is just one of the many ways that they've been taking over our world and taking over our nation. In fact, they basically got the world, and they came that close to taking over America. I to this day, I cannot understand how they allowed Donald Trump to have an election, because they had everything in control, and they could have taken over. Maybe they didn't quite have the armed forces where they needed it. Maybe there were some things lacking, but we know they had big business. We know, other than Twitter, they got social media. We know they got the media. They've got our educational system from beginning to whatever end there could be. They've got our professions. They've got our professional associations. Look at the number of doctors that lost their licenses because they prescribed ivermectin. I mean, it's mind-boggling how much control they have.
Well, let me say this, Peter. Certainly during the COVID 1984 era, I was extremely wary that many of these policies would not change and we would continue to kind of go into this overt abyss. I was also extremely skeptical on the idea that we were going to have free and fair elections in 2024. And by the way, I don't necessarily think that all of them were quote unquote free and fair. I really do go to that mentality and mindset of too big to rig. And I would also point out that if you look at some of the other elections that were not national elections, I think that we still should be questioning why Kari Lake wasn't able to become the governor prior and then a senator later. She was extremely popular. And that's why my hope is that this administration, one of those things that they can do in rather short order before the midterms, is bring in this mandatory voter ID and a paper ballot and an actual system to audit these things in front of people, which we used to have and no longer do. I think essentially what you had is you had a system that had gotten so far that I don't think that they felt that they could rig it in front of people again. They had that plausible deniability excuse of COVID 1984 and just all the smart people weren't going outside and going to the Biden rallies, etc. But then when you look at the hard numbers, Peter, about 10 million votes just disappeared this time around. The 81 million vote man of Biden, nowhere to be seen. I think that Trump took this one, with about 72 million votes. So you have to ask yourself, where'd those 10 million votes go? But that's a question that people with TDS or are just mesmerized by establishment propaganda that they just can't ask, Peter.
Okay, so let me address the different things you've raised. So first of all, you were talking about, okay, well, looking at the election from the first place and looking, we couldn't trust the polls before the election. And really what occurred, in my humble opinion, was that Donald Trump's wish came true, that it was just too big to rig. And you're pointing out some real actual issues, with the 10 million votes, where did they go, and so on. But if you look at the results of the polls that came out after his State of the Union address, we saw that the low number was 69% of the people approved of his speech. Well, let me tell you, the people that have Trump derangement syndrome, they cannot approve of his speech. They can't approve one word of his speech. Okay, they're sick in the head. So you've got 69% of the people looking at CNN, but looking at the other polls, they went up to 76%. This is a real reflection of the number of people that are actually behind Donald Trump. We don't have half the nation behind Donald Trump. We have closer to 3/4 of the nation that have had their eyes opened up. And the libs did it to themselves. The left did it because when they prosecuted Donald Trump, and that's on the front page of every newspaper, it's on the media, it's everywhere. It doesn't really take a smart man. It just takes, somebody's looking at reality to see that the fix was in there by the judge, to see that this man is being persecuted unfairly by the Justice Department, and that the Justice Department has been weaponized. It was obvious. So people started waking up and saying, what's going on here? We got more black men votes, 60% or some crazy number like that. We got a lot of people that woke up. They were treating the minorities as though they were stupid, and they're not stupid. They, as long as you can brainwash people, those people are going to be brainwashed. But sooner or later, once they see the light of day, once their eyes are open, they can't close them anymore. And so what happened was America woke up to what was going on here, and it was too big to rig. So I have a case going on right now. I have also been involved with the election process, and I represent a fellow named Robert Rockford, who lost his bid for Congress. That case is now going on in the House of Representatives. We expect to be able to present our case there. And at the same time, we're suing in the state of Florida because we want to be able to establish that there's something wrong with the voter rolls, because we found some major things wrong. I don't want you to know if you want me to go on about that or speak about the general things that we were talking about in terms of the swing of the nation.
Well, we certainly can talk about the other issues outside of just counting the votes with the machines, with the voter rolls especially, because you're talking about Florida, and Florida was one of the states that actually counted the votes this time around very, very quickly. I think this is a systemic issue, a federal issue that goes on in all 50 states. And in some regard, we should have a centralized way of voting. Again, I hate the machines. I hate the idea, even in Iowa this time around when I voted. Number one, when I first registered and I signed that, it was digital. I didn't even get a piece of paper. So now I'm signing an iPad on my way in. All right. Now the next part is, okay, I've got my paper ballot. Okay, it's right here. I've done it. But in Iowa, again, I'm scanning it into a machine. I don't get a receipt. You know what I get? I get a sticker that says I voted like I'm a 5-year-old. This is an issue with me, and this is supposed to be in one of the better states. I should be
Yeah. Well,
signing in
they,
physically because, number one, the other thing about a digital signature, they didn't give me even a pen. I'm signing on a tablet like I do for when I buy my coffee in the morning with my finger. That is not a real representation of my signature and is going to create more problems than it's going to solve. Bottom line on its face, and I can't be the only one. So, what are some of the
no, you're
solutions?
right.
Go
You're
ahead.
absolutely right.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I think the next upgrade is they're going to give you a lollipop.
Maybe I can get a temporary tattoo and I'll put it right here on my neck and really let people know I voted hard this time around. So, what are some of the solutions that we can move towards during this
Well,
Trump 2.0 administration that maybe we can see results in before the midterms?
what
Because the midterms are going to be right around the corner. You know this, Peter.
they are right around the corner, and there's only one solution in terms of what we need to do from my observations. Okay, so what we found with the voter rolls, well, in regard to what happened in Pinellas County, okay, last time in Florida, uh, you know, the average for 4 months before the election for Pinellas County, the average number of requests for mail-in ballots to have a ballot form sent to a person, or leaving out September 9th, and I'll tell you why in a moment. The number of requests a day were 408 on the average. So it could be zero, it could be 3,500, it could be 4,000. One day it was 4,000. But on September 9th, there were 198,116. How do you get 198,000 on it in one day? So that's really, really peculiar, to put it mildly. And then also, of those, 165,000 of them where the ballots were sent out were not permitted to be sent out because, you see, there's a system in the computer that detects and prevents fraud. And that fraud detection system basically will not send a ballot for somebody that's got a no-no. Now, I'm not talking about no-no like you say to your baby. I'm talking about no-no in two columns. One column, you either put your driver's license number, or the other column, you put the last 4 digits of your Social Security number. And these things this is information you turn in when you first register. So then the computer checks to see if they're right. If you have one in one column, not the other, then you have a yes, no, or no, yes. If you have them in both columns, then you have a yes, yes. But if you didn't have a driver's license number or the last 4 digits of your Social Security number, you do not get a ballot sent to you. Okay, because that's a no. And yet that 165,000, those ballots were mailed out. And the same thing happened in other counties, like Hillsborough County, where it wasn't all a whole mess of them in one day. But yet that voter detection and prevention system was either overridden or simply just turned off, because these things are going out as though these people are qualified, even though they're no-nos.
Well,
And
also, I
so,
mean, we have the revelation that there are people getting Social Security payments that are hundreds of years old. Now, you have to ask yourself if those people are also
yeah,
still on the voting rolls. We got to take a break. The book is What Makes Trump Tick? My Days with Donald Trump. From New York Military Academy to the present. We are with Peter Ticktin. Final segment with Peter Ticktin coming up after this. Hey everybody, Jason Bermas here. Let you know that making sense of the madness is changing for a bit. Soon enough, we're going to be moving to a more commentary-driven show, which airs live on my socials. Now, we hope to get some minor sponsors at $1,000 a piece each month and move it back in the direction of what you just saw with those great interviews with people who have done deep research. Now, until then, I really do need your support individually as well. Consider donating via the links down below, especially the Buy Me a Coffee, $5, $10, $15. It does mean the world to me, and it keeps this broadcast moving. Thank you so much, Bermas Brigade, for your continued support. And we are back with Peter Ticktin. Now, Peter, obviously, there's been a whirlwind of these executive orders. There's a ton of things that we could get into, but one of the things that he did out of the gates that I was extremely happy about was obviously what he did with January 6ers. And after the fact, I would imagine there are going to be a lot of lawsuits. Even to this day, guess what? We still don't have all the video footage that they promised us now years ago with this latest Speaker of the House. In your opinion, where are we really in these cases, and
I
what
can tell
kind of
you,
lawsuits can we expect?
you've asked the right person, because I've gotten together with Mark McCloskey. I don't know that you remember him, but he was the fellow with the AR-15, and his wife had a handgun, and they were protecting their home in St. Louis, Missouri, when the
Absolutely.
Black Lives Matter people were attempting, were threatening their lives and their home. And Mark is a first-class litigator that has cases around the country, the same as I do. And so the two of us have hooked up, and we're now getting ready to start filing some actions. We're now signing up the J6 defendants. I call them actually J6 hostages. And the fact of the matter is these people have suffered in ways that it's hard to even imagine or describe, especially once you start talking to people and seeing how their lives are ruined. Even today, even being released, they still don't have their driver's licenses. They still don't have, they're rejected from all kinds of aspects of society. They can't keep a job or get a job in the first place. Businesses have been ruined. Families have been destroyed. This was one of the first, when I say that we were taken over, I mean, we really were taken over, and our government was turning into a form of a tyranny that was basically controlled by people we didn't even see behind the scenes. And, it wasn't Joe Biden that was running the country for the last 4 years. It was the people that were running Joe Biden. And, the fact is that the J6ers were they were the first, but there were others too. People involved in cyber currencies. They were debanked, and after being debanked, they were not only kicked out of the banking system, but if that didn't work, then they would charge with criminal offenses. We've seen this in many areas, and look at the people that were close to Donald Trump. That Peter Navarro, one of the most decent people that were in his administration, ends up going to jail. This was the beginning. If they thought they were going to win the election, okay, they didn't understand the extreme number of people that are actually had their eyes opened up, and where they're seeing what reality is, that we're going to come out and vote, because otherwise they never would have let it happen. They made one big mistake, and that one big mistake was that they lost. And so now, I mean, you're going to start seeing things happening. Okay, people think that Elon Musk, that he's stopping the flow of money to different sources. They don't know that's just the beginning of it. Okay, they're going to see this money. They're going to see who got the money. Okay.
But let me ask you something. Isn't that going to be problematic now that you have this order to, quote unquote, shred and burn the documentation via USAID that has not already been taken by this, quote unquote, Doge? I mean, first of all, I'm glad that's happening with USAID, but that's just one part of these different apparatuses. It's the Department of Education, it's the Department of Energy, it's the Pentagon, it's the Defense Department, etc. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, that's a crime. So if anybody knows anybody here, I mean, if you know anybody who's going to be destroying evidence, you need to call the FBI and let them know, or call me, or go to legalbrains.com. That's my domain, the website. Get in touch with me. If you know of anybody who's going to be destroying evidence, I'll make sure that it gets taken care of. And I'll be able to protect your identity as well, because I'm an attorney and we'll have an attorney-client privilege. If you know somebody who's going to burn papers or that are going to clear out a computer or do anything to basically hide evidence, let me know. I'll make sure it gets to where it needs to go.
Final question. The Epstein documents. What a debacle. Now, I've been covering this since 2007, 2008, the initial Palm Beach case. I've been on Court Listener. I know there are literally hundreds of thousands, if not millions of pages of documents. If you even go back to when Brad Edwards was representing some of these women, and at the very last minute, as they were picking the jury in that case, before the Epstein arrest, they settled. Edwards and other attorneys were out in front of boxes, which would have been truckloads of documents. Now, we know they have video. We know they have hard drives. We know they have literal booklets with photographs that are marked on the binders. We've seen them all coming out of the New York case. Isn't it true that we're not going to see any documentation of note? If not prior to that, we don't have indictments and prosecutions and real court cases as to release these documents after the criminal behavior has been taken care of. Everything else seems to be window dressing to me, Peter. I'd love to get your thoughts.
Well, it depends. I'm not sure exactly everyone I'm speaking to. So let me just divide the world into two different groups. Those that think that Epstein committed suicide and those that know that he didn't. Okay. If you think he committed suicide, don't worry about listening to anything else I have to say. Okay. Because it doesn't matter. If you know and understand that there is a massive, this is one of the signs of everything I've been discussing. This is one of the indications that our government's been taken over and that there are these groups that basically are far above the law, and these are the same people that get up there and say nobody's above the law when they're talking about Donald Trump.
And by the way, it's not just the left. People like Bill Barr facilitated that lie as well from the inside. And Bill Barr and his behavior.
He was a mistake. Okay, Bill Barr.
I love that you put your hands in your head. Peter, I got to get you for a full hour. We've already run out of time. I could literally pick your brain for days. It's always
Bill Barr is a traitor to this country. Bill
really?
Barr is a
is he? Yeah. No kidding. But again, guys like him get prosecuted.
He's with the seventh largest law firm in the world. I think the largest in terms of revenue. One of their clients is the company that bought the Minion machines. And then all of a sudden, I should be the attorney general. I'm good. I love you, Donald Trump. I love you, Donald Trump. And then he gets to be the attorney general when he was there just for that one purpose, protect the Minion, because that's what he did. As soon as the election got questioned, he was there to be right there.
And Peter, let's not forget, he was a part of Kirkland and Ellis, the law firm that represented Epstein for years. Shocking. I'm shocked. The book is What Makes Trump Tick? My Days with Donald Trump from New York Military Academy to the present. A pleasure as always to be with Peter Ticktin, and a pleasure with you guys right here on Patriot.tv, where the truth lives. Remember this guy, it is not about left or right. It is always about right and wrong. I absolutely love you guys, and we'll see you on the flip side. Hey everybody, Jason Bermas here. Let you know that making sense of the madness is changing for a bit. Soon enough, we're going to be moving to a more commentary-driven show, which airs live on my socials. Now, we hope to get some minor sponsors at $1,000 a piece each month and move it back in the direction of what you just saw with those great interviews with people who have done deep research. Now, until then, I really do need your support individually as well. Consider donating via the links down below, especially the Buy Me a Coffee, $5, $10, $15. It does mean the world to me, and it keeps this broadcast moving. Thank you so much, Bermas Brigade, for your continued support.